Hello and welcome to Brickfilming 101, or Brickfilming for Dummies, or How to Make a Brick Film, or whatever else I decide to title this. But quite frankly, if you're coming to me for expert opinion and tips on brickfilming, then you're quite mistaken. My name's Chris, and today I'm going to be teaching you everything you need to know about brickfilming. For those new to the subject, brickfilming is basically stop-motion animation with Lego. Basically, you take a bunch of pictures and play them back real fast to replicate movement. Brickfilming can be traced back to over 30 years ago, but it continues to grow and develop to this day. But I'm not here to discuss history, origin, and evolution of brickfilming. But if you are interested, check out this series where Silly Panda talks of just that. Today, I will be teaching you the basics of storytelling, cinematography, animation, and editing. Feel free to skip around if you already know some of this, because I'll be covering some beginner and some higher level stuff. We're going to be going in somewhat production order, so... Okay, so storytelling. Pretty easy, right? Not really. A lot of beginner animators fall into the trap of writing too complex or simple of a story. To fix that, try to write it out and script it beforehand. Scripting isn't something you always need to do, but it definitely helps the process. I haven't always scripted, but my videos got noticeably better once I started. It helps you to plan out your story and know exactly what you need to do before you start to do it. Especially if you plan to have talking in your videos, it's best to either write it down before or while you animate so you have something to reference and later send to your voice actors. Scripting out your videos will also help your pacing, the flow of your story. Separating your films into acts, first, second, and third, can help keep the attention of your viewer and create a compelling story. The first act serves to set up your characters and setting, the second act should be the beginning of the story and conflict, and the third is the main action, resolution, and ending of your story. Even if you want to make a simple fight scene, it's important to do these things to make a story that makes sense and is interesting. Structuring your story in these sections helps to make sure it's not too long or too boring. In addition, including a hook at the beginning of your film can also be important. Grabbing the attention of the audience from the very beginning helps to establish strong engagement. Look at most big blockbusters. They all start with action scenes or important moments that will be interesting to the audience. Incorporating a theme, message, or character arc in your story adds another level of complexity and interest. Seeing a character learn a lesson or grow and develop leaves a sense of satisfaction or deeper meaning on the audience, something that can take your stories to a higher level. Now that you've got your story, you're ready to shoot. But first, you need to build all the sets, characters, and props that you're going to need in your film. Building a set can be anything from a simple base plate to a huge city layout. It's important to remember though that only what the camera will see matters. Building the set around what will be seen, test it out with your camera or phone to make sure it looks good at eye level. If you need some more help, check out this video by Houston where he shows off his techniques for set building. If you have a background in your movie that you need to add in during editing, use a green screen. Chroma keying can be a bit tricky to get right, so you should check out this video for tips. For characters, feel free to use whatever you want. Remember though, that the more characters you have in your video at a time, the more pieces you'll have to move in each picture. In order to easier move individual minifigure heads, roll up small strips of sandpaper and rub it inside. If you do it too much, you might have to put a bit of clay in the neck to keep it stuck flat, but it helps to get smoother animation. Now that you're ready to shoot, let's take a look at your... For my camera, right now, I use my Canon T3i DSLR with Dragon Frame to record, but you can use a number of things to actually take the pictures. Throughout my career, I've went from using a Nintendo DSi to an iPod Touch, a webcam with Windows Movie Maker to an iPad, and now to my proper camera. All you need is something to take pictures on and something to play them back. For iPhone and iPad users, I recommend Stop Motion Studios Pro. Advanced animators will probably eventually move to something like Dragon Frame on desktop, which connects to DSLRs and webcams. It's got a wide learning curve though, so something like this video or this website is pretty helpful when you're just starting out. On the topic of animation softwares, while they're extremely helpful, they're not necessarily needed. When shooting, you're going to want to keep your camera still so that your pictures aren't blurry and that the camera stays in the same place between each photo. Here are a number of ways to do this. Build a stand out of Lego or anything you can find. Use headphones with volume buttons to take the pictures. Use a tripod. However, it might not be stable in relation to your animation set. I find that using clay to stick and support the camera on the table you're animating is much more useful and efficient. Use either your animation software to remotely take an image or use a separate remote capture. The most important part of your setup is probably lighting, which I will now explain, but first, for you camera users, here's your camera settings. I don't really know how they work, so yeah, you can watch this instead. Now that we've covered most of the basics, we can get into the more fun and interesting stuff. Lights are arguably the most important visual part of your film. They set the mood and allow the audience to see what you want them to. Whether to replicate an outdoor scene or a darker, moody cantina, they are just as much part of the story as the characters are. Despite their importance, a ton of new brick filmers aren't familiar with a lot of the basic lighting techniques. Even if you're a somewhat experienced creator, I recommend paying attention here if you're not familiar with 3-point lighting. First, your key light. This helps to highlight a character or setting. It's meant to use shadow and the shape of a character to create texture and feel. This will be your main light and is most often closest to the subject. Second, your fill light. This bad boy helps you fill shadows. This one doesn't necessarily have to be a light, but you can also use reflective materials to bounce light into the shadows. It helps you create a more evenly lit image. Finally, your backlight. This light is meant to separate your characters from the background. It creates depth, as well as accents the place of focus. Understanding the basics to good lighting is important to getting an understandable, clean shot. It can help you direct focus with more than just basic compositional framing and establish an atmosphere within your scene. Tweaking or eliminating certain lights in this setup aids in this process, so feel free to tweak around and get the right feel. Lighting is not just bright and dark though. You've got some color too. Red, blue, green, the whole like, you know. I love me some color, especially some color in my brick films. Funny enough, the video I'm actually working on is black and white, but yeah. Here's some cool stuff you can do and throw in some more color. Small key lights. Use a small flashlight or something and stick a transparent color Lego piece on the end. You can use this as a small highlight to make color effects in your film or make subtle tint colorations. Tissue paper. Not gonna lie, I only just found about this one when I was doing research for this video. So if you put tissue paper on your lamps, it makes the lamps that color. So it's pretty cool, I know, but I also did steal this from Rio Force. Watch his video on colored lighting because it's pretty great. It also covers a lot more than just tissue paper, so I recommend that one. So these ones are actually my new favorite trick actually, model train lights. These bad boys come in a ton of colors and are small enough to fit inside lamps and Lego holes, so you can add some nice in-camera lighting to your scene. There are a few brands of Lego specific lights, but they're pretty expensive, so just go to your local hobby store and make sure you get Pico or micro LEDs and they should work more than fine. So finally, color correction. This one's a bit complicated, so you can just watch this video here to explain the basics of color correction. So yeah, I think that's just about it for lighting. Well, here we are finally, animation. You probably thought this was going to be the longest part of the video, given that it's how to make an animation, but you'd probably be wrong. I don't really know because I haven't timed it yet. But in the next few minutes, I'm going to be shooting off every animation tip that I can possibly think of. So just bear with me, here goes. Heads up, you can probably find most of these animation tips here because animation's been talked about a lot. Movements start out small, get bigger, and end small. Learn how to ease in and out of movements with this underappreciated tutorial that explains it better than I ever could. Think squeeze to prepare for movement and stretch during movement, then squeeze in reaction to movement. Cool? No. Confusing? Yeah. But it is cool though. Use secondary motions. Things move in reaction and anticipation to primary movements. Recoveries and windups can look like these. In-camera movement can look cool, but pretty bad if you don't know what you're doing. Follow a point on the character for dynamic, organized handheld. Follow a consistent motion increment for uniform pans, tilts, and other camera movements. Shoot all of the scenes for one set at a time, then move on. Same goes for shots at the same angle. You can order them later in the editing suite. Watch this video to learn how to do a walk cycle, and watch this one for a good run cycle. If you can't see your character's feet, use clay to allow for more dynamic, fluid movement. It's easier to animate on clay than a base plate. To make sure your audience knows what's happening, follow the 180-degree rule. Basically, imagine you're standing to one side of two people talking, looking back and forth. I'm kind of bad at explaining, so feel free to watch this to understand it better. Learn the rule of thirds and use it if you want to. It makes it look nice. If you aren't familiar with the rule of thirds, watch this video. Use leading lines to make an aesthetically pleasing shot. Shoot at eye level, very important. People don't realize this one. Emphasis, much emphasis. Be aware of headroom and leading space. It controls the atmosphere and mood of the scene. Use up free space and balance your shot. Symmetry isn't necessarily required, but adjusting composition for an evenly spread background is helpful for a nicer looking frame. Overlap action on shot changes. Cut a shot where the action is started, change the angle, then continue the shot where the action ends. This makes for a more fluid viewing experience and less of a montage feel. As said by the lonely clone, you don't need smooth animation. Don't make too many jumps between shots. Long takes help to add tension and add immersion to the story. You don't want a mask, trust me, it's awful. Just cheat your way out of it. If you don't know what I mean by that, watch this video. Remember lighting? Just kidding, we're not done with that. During animation, A, close blinds or shoot at night. B, wear black clothes. C, avoid black bricks if you can because they are shiny. D, try not to bump your lights. E, use blinders to block your computer screen or other sources of light that may ruin your scene. Okay, finally we are done with animation. Gee, whew. So now that you're done filming, it's time for... So my editor of choice is Final Cut Pro, but most of these will be general techniques that you can apply to any editor. Editing on an iPhone or iPad can be a bit harder, so I recommend that you get on a desktop as soon as possible if you really want to improve the quality of your edits. First off, I'll be touching on basic visual editing techniques. Editing should not only feel natural, but be nearly invisible. Edit simply, but keep in mind what you want your audience to see, feel, and notice. Form your final shots around these considerations. I touched on this earlier, but cut on action. Same can go for your scenes. Start on an action, finish on an action, cut to an action. Keep only what is necessary to your story, whether in plot or audience rhetoric. Use establishing or wide shots to get a good idea of the layout of your scene. This is especially important in brick films where Lego can look very similar between location and location. Cut from one action movement or object to a similar action movement or object. This can be used to direct attention, answer questions, and also connect your scenes together. Dissolves and fades are for passing time. Use these for establishing shots, point of extreme time change, or to finish scenes. So if you're thinking to yourself, wow, that's a lot to remember, that's just the visual stuff. So I don't really know anybody who really likes audio editing as a brick filmer. It can be fun for a short time, but it can be a real rabbit hole to get stuck into for hours. While you're sitting in the dark adding line upon line of dialogue, sound effects, music, and whatnot, try to remember these tips. Fade in and out audio so there's no interrupting noise cuts. Make sure your dialogue is understandable. Try to balance the levels of your voice actor files so they're similar and or match the environment of your scene. Edit sound effects and music around the dialogue, not vice versa. Use L and J cuts to spice up your dialogue scenes. Instead of using blocky contained dialogue shots, think of the lines as a separate layer that aren't stuck to the character speaking. Having them overlap a shot other than the character at the beginning and or end can help make the flow of the conversation more convincing and realistic. J cuts are named after the leftward extending audio beneath the clip, and the L cut is named after the rightward extending audio. Think of how your video would sound in real life. Is it more echoey? Find a reverb effect in your editor. Would it be louder? Add some background noise. Stereo sound mixing, I'm telling you, it works wonders. Back to L and J cuts, use them to transition between scenes. Sound effects are a good way to introduce things before actually showing them. Sound effects are important. Create a full, complete image using just sounds. If you can't find it on YouTube, Sound Bible, your editor, record your own. Find music first before you edit, preferably before you shoot. Then you should feel the tempo so you know what speed at which you should shoot. So now that you're done filming, shooting, editing, the whole 9 yards, your film is finally done. You can publish to YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. I don't know. Just go ahead and send me your stuff. Hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, and whatnot. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I tried to be as extensive as possible while covering stuff that beginners and amateurs alike would find helpful to their filmmaking. I know a lot of this I learned not from brick filming, rather than from just normal filmmaking, and then I found it very much applicable in helping my brick films become better and improve. So be sure to share this video around. If you aren't familiar with Brick Film Day, this video was made as my contribution to the project. Basically, it's a day where animators all upload on the same day. So if you want to see some examples of some really well-made brick films, be sure to check out that playlist, which will probably be here, and it will probably be in the description down below as well. Stay tuned for my upcoming projects. Star Wars Noir is still in principal photography. I can't give you a date when that's going to be out, but hopefully it will be before school ends, ideally. So yeah, happy Brick Film Day. Go check out those videos, and don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe.